cell phones to vibrate out of respect to those who try and fall asleep. I'm going to share with you tonight some examples from Lashon HaKodesh, this perfect, beautiful, delicious language that Kadosh Baruch Hu created the universe with this language. And in contrast to that, we are living in a difficult time because I'm speaking to you in English and I'm translating Judaism in English. We read a lot of Svarim in English, which is translating Hashkafa, Halacha in English. And that can sometimes be problematic because what's the obvious inherent trap of any translation, especially of Hashem's perfect language? What's the obvious trap? What's the obvious danger? If it is not reflecting the intent behind the word, then what are we reading? Are we really reading Hashem's mind? In the language of Chazal, very soon after Chanukah, we're going to be fasting. So I should translate myself. Fasting. On the Asera B'Teves, on the 10th of Teves, we'll be fasting. It's not a very long fast, but one of the reasons is because of the translation of our Torah in Greek known as the Septuagint. Now it's interesting, who wrote the Septuagint, the original one? Shimon Zakanim. The famous story in Megillah Daf Tes, where you've got 72 of our sages were sequestered, isolated in 72 separate batim, and they were each given a Sefer Torah. None of them knew what was going on with the other. No one knew which each of them were being requested. They were given a Sefer Torah, plenty of ink, a quill, and parchment, and they were told to translate our Torah into Greek. And as you know, the miracle, which arguably is much greater than the miracle of Chanukah, is that 72 sages came out with the exact same translation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu natan b'lev kol echad ve'echad. He put in the mind of every single one of them the exact same type. Rav Hutner quipped that had the sages been in the same room and came out with the same translation, that would have been a much bigger miracle. I think he meant it in humor. I think. I'm not sure actually. Maybe he meant something again. So the point being, nevertheless, that our sages are the ones who were forced by Ptolemy II to provide a Greek translation of our Torah. What do Chazal say about the event? So unfortunately, the Alexandrian Jews at the time, they were the largest community in the diaspora, they actually celebrated this miracle, this open miracle. They paskened on their own that this was a miracle deserving of a Yom Tov, and they made a Yom Tov out of this miracle. Our sages claim the reason why the Alexandrian community was wiped out is because they were celebrating a tragedy. What was the tragedy? Masechta Sofrim, Perek Aleph, Halacha Zayin. The only day in our calendar that matches the magnitude of the tragedy of the translation of our Torah into Greek was the Chet HaEgel. Whoa! Why the Chet HaEgel? The Chet HaEgel was about a Zara. That's exactly the point. Any translation of our Torah, by definition, is another religion, a different religion. It's not the Torah. The Torah Shebichtav, by definition, cannot be translated. Even Rashi, he doesn't translate. He tells us where this word is found elsewhere throughout Tanakh, and then he'll show you which one it must mean in this context. You can't translate the Torah Shebichtav because it was written deliberately so nobody, no non-Jew for sure, no Gentile, and even a Jew has access to it unless he's a member of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. He's plugged into the Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Oraisa, the Chumash, has absolutely no meaning without the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And to translate is extremely dangerous. because it's untranslatable. I'm not going to give you examples this moment, but one quick one. Bereshis bara. Is bara, he created. Is it singular or plural? Which one is it? Singular. Elohim. Singular or plural? Oh, sorry. What's that then? Elohim is singular or plural? It's plural. What's the two-letter root of Elohim? Kel. What does Kel mean? Really means mighty, power. Lavan, Perek said to Yaakov, Yesh le'el yadi. I have power in my hand, to harm you. El means power. Elohim literally translates powers. Bara is singular. Should be baru. No, but it's bara. And Elohim is plural. Right there, before you begin the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, by the way, Medrash Hakara tells us, he put down the kana, he put down the quill. He said, Rabbeinu Shlomo, you're giving a pitcha in pair, you're giving ammunition to the minim, to Napikara. It says, oh, you see there's more than one deity in Shemayim, Has v'shalom. This happened a few times. He put down the quill. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what was coming. Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmeinu. Let us make man in our image. Moshe Rabbeinu refused to write the words. Hashem said, no. You have to write the words because the message in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the message I want to impart by using a word where I'm taking a risk, a deliberate, knowable risk, that I'll be misunderstood in the worst possible way, it's worth the risk because the message is so much greater in its value. The Torah Sheba'al is a book that's closed. If you meet a Christian who says he believes in what they call the Old Testament, he is sincerely mistaken, because nobody with intellectual honesty can take the Torah Sheba'al seriously without the Torah Sheba'al Peh. There's not a pasuk kimat that you can really make any sense of when you look at the diktuk, the grammar, and there's not a single mitzvah, not one out of Tarek mitzvahs, not one that is self-explanatory. There's not one. They are all headlines. There's not enough detail to know how to be a Jew. In the most simplest of mitzvahs, I'm not going into it right now, but you can select any mitzvah you want and you'll see. There's not enough information there to know what to do. There's obviously, whoever wrote the Torah has missing information that you're supposed to be able to access, otherwise this is a book that's closed. In the words of Rav Shamshul Raphael Hirsch, he gives the mashal of going to a lecture. Can you imagine going to a lecture? Can anyone, just in your imagination, can you imagine going to a lecture? Where are you now? Never mind. So imagine you go to a lecture and your spouse didn't make it, and so you go home. You say, listen, it was a really good lecture, don't worry, I've got all my notes, you can just read my notes. Now why is it impossible for anybody to reconstruct the lecture just from your notes? Okay, pretend they can read your handwriting. Well, what's the real reason? It's subjectivity, it's your personal criteria of what you think is most interesting, or what you think are the main points, or what you think is in the mind of the speaker are the main points. So you may not have even captured the main points, but it's also subject to your personal mind. What else? You might have a special code, an asterisk here, color coding here, without you explaining. Torah Sheba'al Peh. Without you there to explain your notes to the person who missed the lecture, they can't be constructed from the notes. Rav Shamshul Raphael Hirsch offers the Torah Sheba'al are the notes to the lecture. The Torah Sheba'al Peh is the lecture. It's a closed book. So Chazal tell us the worst day of our history, arguably one of the worst, is Chet HaEgel, Avodah Zarah. And the only day comparable to it is the writing of our Torah in Greek. Now, let's fast forward. The Greek translation, which most of we don't have today, it's being translated from the original Septuagint, from ancient Greek into Latin, and eventually into English. The main one I'll be mentioning tonight is the King James Bible, known as the KGB. I think that's where maybe that's what KGB got. It's really KJB, but it's very similar sounding. It's all about corruption. 47 cardinals. Actually, one wasn't, but 47 cardinals and one who was not. They were all professors and linguists. 1604 through 1611, over a 7-year period, were charged by King James to write a revised version of the Bible that would be the only and divinely inspired English version that the Church of England would be permitted to use. No other version would be permitted. Amongst their 15 criteria, conditions for how to put this together, there were 6 committees in 3 of the most prominent universities in the world: Cambridge, Oxford, and Westminster. Every single one of these, except for one, was a linguist, a professor, and a cardinal. They were all members of the church. Amongst the 15 conditions was, wherever a word in the original Hebrew that was translated into Greek and Latin would, in English, not reflect Christian theology, should be adapted, amended, changed somewhat. So I'm going to share with you some of the examples, which I'm not here, Hasbashon, to be mekatrig on our translations, but our translations, I'm old enough to be able to say this. I remember as a teenager, 16 years old, in London, there was one Judaica store. It was tiny. It was really, really small. And the only books available that were Al Pi Chazal was Mesilat Yesharim. It has actually been translated at the time. Art Scroll did not exist at the time. And Shari Teshuvah, that was it. There was nothing else. It was just the infancy of what is today an explosion of Torah in English. Why am I telling you this? Because in the last 40 years or so, the demand for more information that reflects our Torah, whether it's Ramban in English, or whether it's the Rabbeinu Bachya, or whether it's the Barbanel, there's so many commentators. There's the Shas Bavli, Yerushalmi. In that incredible demand, the translators have got a choice to spend much more time identifying which is the correct word in English that reflects the intent in Lashon HaKodesh, or immediately go for the most common and popular translation without realizing that's based on the King James Bible, and it's a selected term to deflect, not reflect, deflect the correct hashkafa that's contained in that word. So I'm going to give you a few examples in a few moments. So I'm not here Hashem to be mikatrik, but there are hundreds and hundreds of examples where our hashkafa sachayim is based in the language we're talking that has nothing to do with what Chazal was saying in the original Hebrew. So in Lashon HaKodesh, just to give a quick a sampling of the beauty, the deliciousness of Lashon HaKodesh. Unfortunately, we base our translation mostly on the Christian Bible. So how do we translate holy? Sorry, I made it wrong. How do we translate Kodesh? Sorry. We translate it as holy. The problem is, just pretend for a moment. Please forgive me for speaking this way. Please forgive me. Just pretend for a moment the Chazal are really the mouthpiece of the Torah. What do Chazal say the word Kodesh means? Separate. Muvdal, mufresh. What does that mean? Put aside holy and sanctified. It's not a bad translation, it's just not accurate, and you'll see in a few moments how it's a deflection. Kodesh means mufresh. Mufresh means set aside. Just different or completely different. Muvdal means totally separated. Now add the word Kodesh as an adjective to any term that you and I are familiar with. Shabbos Kodesh. Is Shabbos Kodesh a different day of the week or totally separate, completely unique? It stands in its own category. There's no other day like it. HaKadosh. You're not just a member of a different nation. It's unique. That's what Kadosh means. Unique. It's one of a kind. Please forgive me, I'm not here to be mekatrik against Rabbi Art Scroll Shlita, but their translation is a Christian-based translation. Hakel HaKadosh. We read it every morning. To me, it's frightening. El means power. Kadosh means one of a kind. Unique. Mufresh, mufdal. Hakel HaKadosh, the translation, you check it out yourself, is Holy God. Please be mocking me. I'm just creating awareness. There's no word in the entire Torah, entire Tanakh, that correctly translates G-O-D. The Rabbi Shalom goes out of his way to call himself Elokim, or Eloka, or Shvakais, or Shakai, or Kel, or Adnus, or Yudke Vavke. We have the chutzpah, please be mocking me, to take one word, either Geode or Hashem, which is also not the translation, and generically translate the same name, every 7, 8 different names, the same way. Do you realize what we're training the minds of children to do? When we have them translate Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem, Elokim, Hashem, Adnos, Hashem, Shakai, Hashem. Do you realize what we're doing? We're training the mind of the child not to pay attention to the details in the Torah. Ki'ilu HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a different intent. Oh no, don't ignore it. But if HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes out of his way, why are we smarter in our translation to take an economic term, Hashem or G-O-D, which is not even the meaning of the word? El means power, Kadosh means one of a kind, unique. Hakel HaKadosh correctly translates as the only power. Lashon HaKodesh. You can translate it the Christian way if you want. Holy tongue. But it's not beginning to get a grip on the intent. Kodesh means mufresh, mufdal. L'chaim. Lashon is referring to a language. This is a perfect language. It's a unique language. It's the only language. Now watch this. Lashon HaKodesh is the only language. That means, hey, 1 second. Perek Yud Aleph, Pasuk Aleph to Tes in Parshas Noach, the whole story with Migdal Bavel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu confounded the nations into 70 languages. So how can you say Lashon HaKodesh, the correct height, is the only language? Well, you have to ask yourself, in what 2 ways is Lashon HaKodesh Kodesh? Completely mufresh, totally unique, the only language. And you know the answer. You say every morning, Baruch She'amar V'haya Olam. What created reality? For those still awake, what created reality? The words HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke. Oh, so he created Aleph base, combining them into words as he spoke. The words created reality. Vayom Hashem Yehi Ar, Vayi Ar. The light existed because he said so. This is the power of our language. It created reality. That's number 1. That's how it's mufresh. There's no other language like that. Number 2, and this will be a surprise to some of us. We know the story of Migdal Bavel. How many languages were spoken till that point? So I'm not going into Yerushalmi in Megillah, Perek Beis, Halacha Tes right now, because there are days that there were all 70 languages were spoken from Adam Rishon onwards. I'm not going into that right now, but just taking from the Pasuk. Pasuk Aleph and Perek Yud Aleph, Vahi kol haaretz safa achas. The entire earth was one language. Rashi, quoting Medrash Tanchuma in Perek Tes there in Parshas Noach, tells us what? Which language is it referring to? Lashon HaKodesh. You can look up the Torah Tamima, there's very elegant explanation that up until Noach they did speak 70 languages. There was one international language, Lashon HaKodesh. After Noach, who was still alive at the time of Migdal Bavel was in 1996, Noach died in 2006. I do a timeline, and if some of you might have seen it, of 6,000 years of Jewish history from Brias Olam to Tiras HaMesim. So I show that Noach died in the year 2006. We're in the year 5,776. So I had an 11-year-old come up to me and said, I thought Noach lived 1 week after Adam. Parshas Noach is 1 week after Bereshit. And 2,000 years, 2,006 years have gone by. That's more than 1/3 of human history. So, but that's just an aside. Lashon HaKodesh is a perfect language. We spoke Lashon HaKodesh till Migdal Bavel. Then it got confused into 70 languages. Here's the question. Are those 70 languages separate, individual, isolated languages, or do they all originate from Lashon HaKodesh? So I'm going to share with you a very interesting claim. Lashon HaKodesh is the mother tongue of all languages. And that's another aspect in which it's Kodesh, it's Muvdal. It's the only one original language. Example in English. I'll just give you a few examples. What does shoresh mean in English? Root. What's another word in English for root?
Source.
Source. Excellent. So if you read it like this, how would you read it? Source, very good. 10 points for Gryffindor. Excellent. Can you see this word here at the back? Peiros. How do you translate peiros into English? Fruit. If you read it like this, how would you read it? Fruit. Oh, very good. Are you getting the picture? I'm going to have to turn the paper over. In Lashon Kodesh, the word prat, what does that translate in English? Detail. What's another word in English for detail? Part. Oh, very good. Are you starting to get the picture? Part. What does shekel mean in English?
Money.
It's money. How do you measure money? From ancient times, you weigh it on a scale. Oh, very good. And a scale, in Lashon Kodesh, there are a number of letters which are interchangeable because the sound, it's a phonetic language, are extremely similar, like kuf and kaf. Seichel, kuf, kaf are from the same family. Seichel, what are you doing? What's a scale do? What's the purpose of a scale?
To measure.
It measures. It measures fine distinctions between one weight and another. What's your seichel doing every waking moment of your life? Constantly measuring. Estimating the value of, is this worthwhile? Am I going to gain from this? Should I focus over here? What should I put my strengths into? Your mind is constantly measuring seichel, scale. Where do you go to develop your mind to be able to learn subtle differences between
School.
Oh, you go to school. Oh, very good. Are you starting to get the picture? Sorry, gentlemen. Can you see it in your mind's eye? I can see it on the other side. Okay, great. You go to school. Now, hopefully, and this is not a political statement against the yeshiva movement, but when you graduate from school, what do you hopefully come out with?
Seichel.
Seichel. A degree that with that. It used to be people went to school to learn something to be able to apply a trade. Another word for that in English is a skill. Very good.
Oh, skill.
Are you starting to get the picture? In English, you say, oh, if someone has a poor intelligence, you say they've got a dull mind. What does dull mean in Lashon Kodesh? Poor. What type of poor is dull referring to? Dull is referring to Ein Dalas Ela B'das. Nadarim Mem Aleph. Oh, the concept of someone who's dull is they're poor in mind. Poor in mind doesn't mean unintelligent, it means poor thinking. The word dull, by the way, mindless object, I imagine comes from dull. Are you starting to get the picture? The purpose of tonight is not to convince you of the origin of English coming from Lashon Kodesh, but I do have here a book called The Word. It's a dictionary that reveals the Hebrew source of English by Isaac Moses. He's actually from Yid. He only has 14,000 examples of where English comes from Lashon Kodesh. He actually wrote a separate book called The Origin of Speeches. Now, this is a takeoff from Darwin, who's the father of evil. Evolution. Sorry, just swallowing. Darwin, he came up with a theory of evolution where he wrote a booklet called The Origin of Species. So he's explaining in this book here, which is several hundred pages, he has graphs of up to 52 languages showing you that when you identify them, the 2 or 3 letter shoresh in Lashon Kodesh, every word is made up of a 2 or 3 letter root. If you listen carefully, your mind starts to get sensitized to notice even in English how many words originate from Lashon Kodesh. So, for example, I'm just going to give you my favorite, regular. Listen to the most pronounced parts of the word. Ra, ga, la. Which Isius? Regel. What does a regel do? You learn to walk until you start crawling, and then you're standing, then you're walking, and as you're walking, you're pacing yourself till you can regulate your pace. Oh, so you can walk regular. Oh, and it comes from regel. Here's an obvious one. Direction. Derek. Ah, you're starting to pick up? See, once you start sensitizing yourself to the way language permutates, basically what we're claiming is Lashon HaKodesh is the mother tongue. It created reality, but it's also the mother tongue that's the origin of all languages. In Sefania, Perek Gimel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that in the future, one of the nevuahs is that the entire earth will be speaking a Safa Brua, a clear language. Look, all the Mepharshim is referring to Lashon HaKodesh, because Lashon HaKodesh is a perfect language, a unique language. Let me share with you how far this has gone, especially in the world of Christianity. I'm not going to belabor the point, but in the world of Chinuch, very sadly, I personally think it's really tragic, because if Chazal tell us that our sages' translation, which was Baruch HaKodesh, was a tragedy of the magnitude of the Chet Egel, because it's essentially offering another religion. You can't see Yiddishkeit in the Septuagint. You can't see it in, please forgive me, in any English translation either. With the help of Mepharshim, yes, and especially if it's in the original. If that is a tragedy, then how much more so would it be if we are adopting English words to translate our Torah in a hashkafa, which has all to do about the Masorah? How do you reach kids? And I'm just, please forgive me, I'm not here to be in country. I'm going to share with you horrific examples. How do you and I translate Mora? The world of Chinuch, this is the most sensitive area. How do we translate Mora? Just be honest. Teacher, thank you. How do we translate Melamed? Teacher, thank you. How do we translate the word Rabbi? Teacher, thank you. How do we translate the word Machanech? Teacher. Or educator. Question. Is there a question on the integrity of Lashon HaKodesh for choosing 4 words for the same meaning? Or is the kasha on the Christian-based translation, which gives us one translation for 4 different words? Just be honest. Which one is it? Another cup, thank you. Which one? Obviously, there are 4 different meanings here. And the fact that we've chosen one is not our choice. It's the most popular translation. And therefore, without thinking, we're borrowing from the King James Bible. Listen, please be me. Am I offending anybody if I base the Masorah on Chazal and not Christianity? Okay, fine. Melamed. Perek Gimel Pasuk Dalet in Mishlei. Says the Metzudas, Melamed is Lashon Moilid. He says a Melamed, and this is exact language, a Melamed is someone who's Moilid, causes to give birth, Chochmah, wisdom, belev HaTalmid, in the mind of the student. That's what a Melamed is. It's not a teacher. That's actually a Christian translation, and today its use is not even what it really means. Today we use the word teach to transfer information, deliver information. The Torah was never, ever a model of delivery of information. The Torah Shabbat is written so you can't understand it. You're forced to what? What are you forced to do when you read the Torah?
Learn, study.
Think, ask questions, challenge. Oh, the Torah screams out Darasheni. I'm sorry if I get a bit carried away. Darasheni, the Christian translation, brilliant. It's so clever. It's so clever. They use the word interpretation as the translation for drush. It's brilliant. It's the exact opposite of the word in Lashon HaKodesh. Interpretation has the insinuation that this is my pshat. Based on my worldview, my value system, my education, my background, this is how I see the meaning. And therefore, the sages interpret the Torah this way. The language they coined, and Reform Judaism went to town with this one. Rabbinic Judaism is not a complimentary term. The intimation is that the rabbis invented Judaism when they wrote the Mishnah. Do you understand the problem here? In Lashon HaKodesh, drush doesn't mean interpretation. What's the 2-letter root? Always ask yourself, what's the shoresh? What's the 2-letter root of drush? Dash. What does dash mean? Lamates Malachas. What do you do with dash? You thresh. When you're threshing, what are you doing? You're removing something that's inside. For example, the most classical example is a pea in the pod. Once you remove the pea, you've extrapolated. That's the key word here. You remove something that's there all along, but you can't see until you remove it. You see, drush means to show where your pshat is inside the words. If I cannot do that, that is interpretation. We're not interested in my interpretation. If I can't show you where it's in the words of the Chumash, or Rashi, or Rishon, then guess what? Then that's not pshat. I'm making that up. As much as I am attached to my understanding, if I can't show you where it's in the text, that's not legal. That's not halachically sound. That's not integrity. You follow the difference is 180 degrees. So they made up a whole thing that Chazal are interpreting the Torah. Rahman al-Islam. Back to Rabbi. Let's take Rabbi. Just go to the root. What's the two-letter root of Rabbi?
Rav.
What does Rav mean?
Teacher.
A lot. What does a Rabbi have to have? A lot of information, knowledge, Torah. What else? A lot of patience. What else? Rosh B'nai Yisrael. Why is he Rosh B'nai Yisrael? What's the mission statement of Chinuch in the Torah? Shlomo Melech, Perek Beis, Pasuk Vav and Mishlei. Hanoch lenar al pi darkai. I'm going to let myself get distracted for a second. I hope I'm not. Perek Beis in Bereshis by the Akedah. Avram Avinu takes Shnei Hana'arim, the two young lads. One was Yishmael, who was how many years older than Yitzhak? 13. Yitzhak at the Akedah was 37. How old is Ishmael? You can take a vote if you like. Okay, 50. Good. So now, Yishmael is 50 years old and he's called a Na'ar. Eliezer is 76 at that time. They're called Shnei Hanarim. Even Yitzhak was called a Nar in the same parak by the Akedah. He's 37. Yeshua Hanash lo Yamush Metoich Ha'ayil. Parak Lamed based in Shmais Kitisa. He's called a Nar that never left the Ayil of Moshe Rabbeinu. He's called a Nar. He's 46. Kalev and Pinchas were the Shnei Na'arim that Yeshua sent in Parak Beis in Yeshua to spy out Yerichai, and they're called young lads. Whoa! Young lad is a possible meaning, but Lashon HaKodesh is a perfect language. That means it's not frozen in one meaning. There can be multiple meanings. And the vast majority of times, the word Nar doesn't mean young lad. Vast majority. Says the Radak. Radak V'Kimchi, one of the Rishonim. A Nar is a Mesharet Legadol. A Nar is someone who is apprenticing to someone who is independent. The word Gadol really means independent. The Christian translation is great and big. We're stuck with that, and it's not bad, but it's not accurate because it doesn't give you a full picture. The concept of a Gadol is someone who's independent. That's what a Gadol, a cotton, is dependent. That's why in the laws of Tzedakah, you have an amazing statement. This is not a political statement. Cotton she'einoi soymech al shulchan aviv nikra gadol. A young child, minor, who's no longer dependent on dad for a paycheck, he's called an adult. V'gadol shesomech al shulchan aviv nikra katan. It's not an age, it's a maturity. Because I'll give us the age for a minor and an adult, but there's a concept here. So a Nar, according to the Radak, is someone who's Mesharet Megadol. So he says right there, by Shnei Hana'arim, by Kalev and Pinchas, Kalev is 86 years old. He's called a Nar. It doesn't mean young lad, it can, but most of the time it doesn't. But the Christian translation doesn't want us to know what it means. And Rahman al-Islam, most of the time, we don't even check out what the Rishonim say the word means, and we go straight to the English translation based on King James Bible. Is that a problem? That's a problem. The Septuagint is still alive, Rahman al-Islam, ad hayom, through the Christian translation of our Torah, based on the Septuagint and the Latin version, and we're stuck with that translation. All I'm trying to bring up is not a hustle from a kid, it's just more of an awareness. Watch out, because there's a massive a massive treasure of hashkafa waiting to be drawn out when we realize what these words really mean. Now back to Rabbi. We said a Rabbi, someone has to have a lot of information, a lot of love, patience. Question. Hanach le'na'ar al pi darkai. You got to train the person who, in the Lashon of Radak, Ein Shalim, is an Adam she'ein Shalim. In some respect, is not complete. A child, it could be an adult too. It's training. Al pi darkai. Who does darkai go on? Ein Panim L'Torah, in 3,000 years since Shlomo Melech wrote this. Does it go on the Rebbe, Rosh Hashiva, Menahel, Godladar?
The parent.
The parent?
Child.
The individual child. Ladies and gentlemen, in your classroom you've got 25, 30 kids. How many darkais do you have according to the Torah? 25, 30. What does a Rebbe have to have a lot of?
Darkais.
A lot of ways of reaching different kids. Because if I have one style of teaching and it works for 50%, that would be pretty amazing. But what about the other 50%? What about the kids at the top of the class, the kids at the lower end who are struggling? Do I have enough rights to get to them? Yes or no? Yeah, the word Rebbe means a lot. I've got to have a lot of different ways. Rav Preda did not teach the same way 400 times. That poor kid would have died from boredom. No, he had just another and another, just kept thinking of different ways to reach this child. I'm just giving you a sampling when we start looking. I'm going to end with Leib, because Leib, unfortunately, the Christians really messed up on. It's deliberate. It's deliberate. There's no question about it. Because Christianity is based on faith, which is based on blind acceptance. They do not have answers to the most obvious, glaring questions. Their generic answer is faith. Faith. You just got to believe. When I lived in Gibraltar, I helped start a kollel there many years ago. It's a bilingual community. They all speak English and Spanish. They learn English in school, but they speak Spanish at home. So I didn't learn that much Spanish. I was more involved in teaching in English to the community. But I did learn how to solve every single problem with one word in Spanish, mañana. And the amazing thing was, when the problem resurfaced the next day, the same solution worked. Mañana, mañana, mañana. Tomorrow I'll start my diet. Tomorrow I'll be a better spouse. Tomorrow I'll be more dedicated to this child. Tomorrow I'll take my learning seriously. Tomorrow I'll start davening with Bakavana. Mañana, mañana, mañana. Oh, not a good solution to any problem. Comes along Christians and they translate this word one way. And you check out your entire Tanakh in English. This is the only taich. Leib, we taich unfortunately all the time as heart. In Tanakh, I'm not even talking about Chazal now. In Tanakh, the word Leib has 4 possible meanings. Thank you. First, thank you. First and foremost, Leib means mind, thinking. I'll show you in a few moments. The second is, it can mean the icon of emotions. Your emotions. The icon, and that's what's intended by the Christians. Because it's all about belief, which is you just believe because you feel it's right. And 1.3 billion people agree with them. So it's emotions, the icon of emotions. Number 3, it's a mashal. It's simply a metaphor. So for example, we say every morning in our davening, Kafu tahaimais belev yam. The ground congealed, became dry, belev yam, in the heart of the sea when we crossed the Yam Suf. There's no lave in the sea. Rashi tells us lave means it's in the middle, in the midst. It's a metaphor. Moshe Rabbeinu, Perek Hey, in Parshas Vayeschanan, describes Matan Torah again, where he says, Hahar, the mountain, Har Sinai, Boyer was flaming ad lev shamayim, till the heart in heaven. There's no heart in heaven. It's a metaphor, it's a metaphor. Rashi explains, B'taich, in the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the lightning, and the sound of the increasing decibels of the shofar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in that enormous revelation, the flames were boya ad lev shamayim. It means in the midst of all that tremendous noise and thunder, there's no lay there. It's a metaphor. The 4th meaning is literally the heart, the physical heart. The physical heart. So, for example, Perek Chavches, Parshas Tetzaveh, when Aaron Cohen is wearing the Choshen al Libai, it means against his heart, the physical, the center of his body. That's where the heart really is located. So it can mean the physical heart. It can mean a metaphor. It can sometimes refer to emotions, very rarely, but it can sometimes mean that. But the vast majority of times, lev means mind. Ten v'leveinu bina. The Vilna Gaon offers, if you want to know the meaning of any ice in the Torah, find where it first appears in the Torah at the beginning of a word. If you want to know the meaning of a word, find where it first appears in the Torah in a pasuk. Where's lev first appear in the Torah? Perek Vav pasuk Hey in Parshas Bereishis. Vayar Hashem saw ki rabba rasa adam. The negativity of mankind was abundant. The kol yetze machshavos liboy. Machshava, where do you do your thinking? In your heart or in your mind? Machshavos liboy. Rak kol hayom was negative all day long. Oh, the word lev is referring to your mind. Where do you think? You think it's in your mind. We say every morning, it's from the likut of the Psukim, before Psukim Zimra, taken from Mishlei, Perek Yutes Pasuk Kabbalah. Rabbis Machashavos Belevish. There are many thoughts in the mind of a person. You don't think over here, you think over here. Hacham lev. Now the Christians want the word lev to only mean emotions. Because it's a completely emotion-based religion. Ours is based on emunah, which they translate as faith. The word emunah comes from 3 letter roots. Amen. Amen means, I agree this is true. The mitzvah of emunah is which pasuk in the Torah? Which pasuk? Which mitzvah in the Torah? The pasuk is the mitzvah of emunah. I am your constant power. Forgive me if I translate according to Chazal. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei means constant. El means power. Elokecha, I am your constant power. And you know how you know? Because you experienced, your witnesses. You saw me take water. Is water power? Katrina, is water power? Sandy, is water power? Yes or no? Of course it is. I turned it to blood, says the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Is earth powerful? Yeah, I turned it to lice. Is hail made out of fire and water? Yeah, I made them coexist. They had their own GPS system, and they knocked out limbs and arms and broke the necks of Mitzrayim. You saw every power in creation. Arbe was blown by the wind, which was blowing the Arbe from east to west and back again. Something else was forcing the wind. Oh, says the Kodesh Baruch Hu, oh, you get my message? Every element in creation, you witnessed the animals out of control. Yeah, wild animals, wild. Well, not exactly. These Arab, well, they only attack the midstream. Yeah, because I'm controlling the animals. I control water, I control dust, I control earth, I control fire, I control wind, I control light, I control darkness, I control life. 1 second before midnight, every Bechor in Israel is alive. 1 second later, they're all dead. Anochi, Hashem Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Elokecha. I am your constant power. Do you know how you know? Because you witnessed me be the one power. Elohim is the one power behind all powers. Shulchan Aruch, Siman Hey, Baruch. What does Elohim mean? Takif, Bala Yicheles, Ba'ala Koiches Kulam. You are the one power behind all powers. Our mitzvah of emunah is based on testimony. Famous Ramban. Why didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher bara es olam? It was on his resume, by the way. Pretty impressive. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu introduce himself as the creator? How many witnesses were there? Zero. So he would have been requiring of us what type of emunah? It's almost blind. Now, Rabbeinu Bachya says it's enough. We don't need more than that first pasuk in the Torah. But nevertheless, the vast majority of Rishonim agree that the mitzvah of emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu is this pasuk. The word emunah really means conviction. This is not my taich. Rabbi Shimon Schwab of blessed memory told me himself. Had many conversations with him about this subject. He was very, very upset, I'm not going to say now, about a lot of words that we've taken out of Christianity, and we're corrupting our own hashkafa because of the words. One of them was the word imun. He said, Ani mami b'emunah shlema, we unfortunately teach, I believe with complete faith. It's a very weak statement. I believe with complete faith means I don't know, but I believe anyway. We're allowed to go to that when we don't understand the Kodesh Baruch. Of course we go to Emunah Pshuta, we trust Hashem because we've got a track record. But he said the correct translation of Ani Mami b'emunah shlema, correct translation says, I am convinced with absolute certainty. Do I understand Hashem? No. But I'm convinced with absolute certainty because the Kodesh Baruch has a track record. He took us out of Mitzrayim. He made many promises. When you and I make a promise, we say Bli Neder. When the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave hundreds of nubuas, how many times did he say Bli Neder? He never says that. Why? He knows the future. He controls it. There's no chashash that something's going to interfere. You're going to get thrown out of your land, not once but twice, 70 years in between. Yirmiyahu, Perikaveh, you'll be 70 years out of Eretz Yisrael. Achashverosh makes a party for 180 days. Ladies, how many of you can handle 3 days Yom Tov? What was he so happy about? 180 days? What are you so Pasimcha? His miscalculation that the Yidden had not come back after. He believed in the Nebuah. He was out by 5 years. You'll be thrown out of your land not once, but twice, 7 years in between. When you're thrown out the second time, Golas Edai, you're going to be thrown out of your land, spread throughout the whole world. Check it off. I cover my Brooklyn accent very well. I'm born in London. My father's Italian. My mom was born in Baghdad. I was told that she should have been born in Baghdad. Mom, she's born in Baghdad. My wife was born in Bombay. My wife's father was born in Afghanistan. My wife's mother was born in Eretz Yisrael. Both her parents are from Iran. My father's mother was born in Brisk. 3 of my children are British. Now the 3 are Yankees. Now you know why I'm so confused. I sound like a missionary vomit. Have we been spread throughout the whole world? Yes or no? Yes. Absolutely. Check it off. You will be spread throughout the whole world. Yeah, really? You will be spread, but you're going to retain your identity. How can you do that? Put a Hispanic in America. How many generations does it take for him to be completely assimilated, totally absorbed in American culture? 1, maximum 2 generations. We have been spread throughout the whole world, and you're still recognized as Jews. Same Shabbos, Kashrus, Yom Tov, Pesach. Oh, really? Oh, that's Nebuah. I'm giving you Nebuah, says the Kodesh Baruch Hu, so you can trust. You'll see me, not just at Mamad Har-Sinai. We've got unbroken Masorah, generation after generation. He Sha'amda. You can see it. We're living through it. Everyone in this room has been through a Pesach where you had a parent and a grandparent. My last Pesach, my father, Alav Shalom, that he was a great-grandfather. Myself as a grandfather, kids and grandchildren. 4 generations. I'm sure there's people here who've been at a Leil Seder with 4 generations in one room. Do you realize one generation can easily be defined as 50 years? Your 50 years, your 50 years, your 50 years. How many 50s in 100? 2. How many 50s in 1,000 years? 20. How many 50s in 2,000 years? 40. How many 50s in 3,000 years? 60. How many 50s in 3,327 years since Mamad Har-Sinai? 66 and a bit. You just need 66 people lined up with 50 years each, who in their own lifetime has an overlap of 2 or 3 or 4 generations, and you can see how short the Masorah really is. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I want you to see that after Mamad Har-Sinai, I went into hiding, but I gave you Nebuah, so you could see yourself. At the end of time, you can look back and see, did I throw you out of the land once, twice, 70 years in between? You've retained your identity, being spread throughout the whole world, you remain few in number, your land will remain desolate till you return. All these things will find you, but Acharis Hayamin, where's that? First 1,000 years, right about Adam Rishon? No. 2,000? Yitzhak is born 2048. No, that's not Acharis Hayamin. That's not the end of days. How about 3,000, time of the building of Bais Rishon? No, how about the Mishnah, that's time of 4,000 years? No. 5,000, what about Rambam? You live in 5,776, a little bit short of 6,000. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu writes in Perek Dalet, Pasuk Lamed in Bais Chanan, check it off. All these things will have happened to you by the end of time. so that when you arrive near when Mashiach's about to come, you can check, have I been with you? Did I forget about you? Or have I been keeping my promises? You will come back to the land. This is not a political statement. How many Jews in the world today? 13 million. How many Jews in Eretz Yisrael live today? 6 million. We're almost over 6 million, 8 million, 2 million Arabs, but the last census in December 2013 was just over 6 million. So we're really at the tipping point. 1 second, your grandparents, great-grandparents never saw Eretz Yisrael, let alone lived there. Today, nearly half the Jews in the world live in Eretz Yisrael. Oh my gosh. The last 3 Nevuos, which haven't come about yet, Kibbutz Goliath, Mashiach building by Shlishi, Tchisa Mason. Do you see where you're up to? 6 million Jews live in Eretz Yisrael after 2,000 years of almost total Goliath? Oh, Rabbi Shalom, you're on schedule. Hashem gave us the ability through Chanukah. He said, light these candles. So every year I want you to know, and no matter how dark the winter is, no matter how difficult your life is, no matter how difficult it is with this wife, or with this child, or with this mother-in-law. No matter how difficult, I want you to know, my Torah is perfect, it's delicious. Learn it in the original, study it in Art Scroll, but check out the Hebrew, find out what it really means, because my Torah is beautiful, it will open up worlds to you. The word lev really means mind. Sefer Charedim, Perek tells us how many mitzvahs in the Torah? 613. How many are tali belev? Depend on what you think. 51. Mitzvah of Emunah takes place where? In your mind. Mitzvah of After Recha Kamoicha. It's over here. It's not in your pinky, it's not in your elbow. You can do chesed with your hands, but the mitzvah is your attitude. Kibbud Ava'im really starts up here, it's an attitude. Yeah, the mitzvahs, many of the mitzvahs are tali belev. But Tzedek Tishbot Amitecha requires of, put aside the mitzvah where it applies to a dayan, but where Chazal tell us, Habidanet Kol Adam L'Chavschos, based on this pasuk, but Tzedek Tishbot Amitecha, you see a Jew do an Aveira. But in your creative imagination, if there's any possible interpretation that puts them in a positive light, which of those two does the Torah require my mind to select? The Aveira I saw him do, or in my imaginative imagination I should select a different one that puts him into a favorable way? The Torah tells me, but Tzedek, that's over here. Oh, the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael, Avas Ageh, Sinah, Lo tisna et achicha bil va'avecha, correctly translates as, don't hate your brother in your thoughts. Because if I don't stop thinking negative, I'll end up hating over here. Comes on Rabbi Victor Miller, Hatzal, and says the word lev, Hashem deliberately wants the word to mean both your mind and your emotions, because he wants us to know that he doesn't want us to be clinically correct and just right. He wants us to get excited about the beautiful Torah that we fill our minds with. Lo tasuru acharei levavchem. Don't follow your thoughts. Well, whose thoughts am I supposed to trust then? Oh, fill our minds with Hashem's beautiful Torah, so that when we look at the world, we're looking at the world through his mind. Das Torah means put it into here. So I'm not following my initial thoughts, I'm following your thinking. The word lev most of the time means thinking. There's much more to carve out, but it's a late evening. In the schus of us realizing the Septuagint, the Greek translation, was a deliberate attempt to create almost literally a new religion out of starting our Torah, because they have no access to our Torah except through the Torah Shabbat Peh, and that's a closed book to the whole world except for us. We have every reason to be so besimcha and mighty to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we are survivors in this last generation, ending up at this time in Chanukah to be mighty to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you have kept us strong. Will we get through the last nisyonos? And the answer is your choice. But the Torah is there for the taking. Enjoy, and because of that, we see the coming of Mashiach. Amen.